Welcome back to my kitchen. I hope that we can visit today and do some baking and cooking and enjoy a beautiful spring day here on the homestead. So grab a cup of tea or coffee and let's spend some time together today. I'm starting my morning by putting on some sourdough tortillas. We're going to have some wraps for dinner and I wanted to get some dough going. I will leave a link for this recipe in the description box. It's super easy and I make it probably at least a couple times a month and we just love having them. I wanted to talk today about being a from scratch cook and ways that it can be less stressful. When I first started, in my mind's thinking that I want to make everything from scratch, it was a little overwhelming because there's a lot of things you don't think of that you buy maybe at the grocery store and that you could make at home, and it seems to take so much of your time right at first until you get in kind of a swing and get a rhythm with it. So I am going to tell you things I do. I have baking days like today where I'll bake up a lot of stuff and I'll freeze them, but they're on hand and I can just grab them. Now here I have a new recipe on the blog for a whole grain sourdough sandwich bread that is in grams. I get a lot of questions for recipes that are in grams, and so I went ahead and made one, and you're going to notice that I started mixing in my stainless steel bowl, and then I'm going to be mixing in a different bowl because I forgot to tighten up the little nut on the bottom of that stainless steel bowl, and water went everywhere, so I just went with this bowl. But this recipe is slightly sweet. You don't have to use the honey, but it is a little sweet. I soak the flour for 30 minutes. Now for this recipe, I'm using part hard white wheat and part kamut, and it makes a really nice light loaf. I just put all of the flour in there because it's in grams, and so you don't have to measure it out with cups. And it's the good thing about recipes that are in grams is that you don't really have to think about it. You just weigh everything out and it works. And so I do like that. It's a little extra step that I usually don't take, but I wanted to make one for the blog. Now this one does have olive oil and honey in it. You can leave the honey out if you want, but it does give it, it's just a little, and it does give it a nice flavor, because when you're using whole grains, if you're not used to them, especially, they can be a little earthy, and the honey kind of breaks that a little. So I'm just going to get this bread going and get it fermenting for the day before I get on to other things. I need to work on those tortillas in a little bit, and I wanted to show you really quick, when you mix this dough up after it's soaked, it looks a little like it's not going to come together when you add the oil and the honey in there and the salt. And I want to show you the difference in, I timed it, it was 1 minute on speed 2. So here's how it starts out. You can see it's kind of runny, there's stuff, you know, on the sides, and you are going to think, okay, this made a mess, this isn't going to come together. But after 1 minute, I came back and this is how it looked. So rest assured, it will come together and it will be just fine. But I think a lot of times we keep adding flour because it looks loose, but it will come together if you just kind of give it some time. But I'm going to let this knead for about 10 minutes, and then I'm going to put it in my loaf pans. They are 8.5 by 4.5. I get that question a lot. They're large loaf pans, and I am going to divide this dough in two and get it rising for the day. Okay, don't do as I do. I got so busy that I let this overproof and it started falling in the pan. It still turned out fine, but I should have called it probably an hour before I put it in the oven. Another tip that I have about cooking from scratch is having certain ingredients on hand. So like I always have at least 2 dozen boiled eggs in the refrigerator so that I can quickly make an egg salad sandwich for lunch and not have to think about it. I can just throw it together. So I always have bread on hand, and I always have like homemade mayo and some boiled eggs, and we can have lunch in like less than 10 minutes because I have these things on hand at all times, and I don't have to sit and think too much about what I'm going to be making. And same thing for dinner. I like to make a big pot of rice at some point in the week and have it ready to add beside of meals, and it bulks up any meal that you're going to eat. I also like to cook up a chicken at some point, and I will eat on that all week long. We'll have sandwiches, we will have these wraps that I'm going to make this evening, and it just makes it so much easier to cook from scratch if you're somewhat prepared with ingredients that are already fixed up. So instead of saying, oh, I'm only going to make enough bread as what we need, I make tons and put it in the freezer. I have bagels in the freezer, I have cookies in the freezer, I have bread loaves in the freezer. And that way, when it's time for me to cook the meal, I'm not kind of like, well, we don't have this, we don't have that. If you have bread, you can make something, and if you have some kind of protein source. And so that's kind of my go-to. Now I'm going to work on these sourdough tortillas and get them rolled out and cooked up for the meal that I'm making this evening. One thing that I really never talked about on this channel is my favorite cast iron skillet, and that is a Field company skillet. You can spend a lifetime trying to get a cast iron skillet as smooth as this skillet is. When you buy like a modern lower cost skillet, they're rough on the inside, but look at this skillet. It is like your great grandmother's skillet right out of the box. And so I pretty much use this one for everything, and I do link it below in the description box of most of my videos. So if you're interested in like the best cast iron skillet ever, you need to check it out. They're also lighter than a lot of the modern ones, and so it just works perfect for me. Now here's my overproofed bread. It did turn out okay, it's fine. It didn't drop too much in the oven, but don't be like me. Keep an eye on your bread and catch it before it starts falling again. It was kind of warm in here, and I just wasn't paying a lot of attention. So for dinner, like I said, I'm going to make some chicken wraps, and I'm just going to saute up some onions and the chicken that leftover chicken that I had from the other day. And I'm just going to put them in these tortillas with some lettuce and some Greek yogurt, and we're gonna have rice on the side. Now, I have this thing with rice, and it's kind of weird, probably. I don't know if anybody else does this, but when I make rice, I always put a jar of salsa in it because it gives it so much flavor. And I don't know, it's just my favorite thing in the whole world. And I'll tell you a little trick. If you make a pot of rice and you add the salsa to it and heat it back up and add some scrambled eggs in there, I'm telling you, try it. It is one of the quickest meals you can get on the table. Leftover salsa rice, as I call it, and scrambled eggs, and it is filling. It's got your proteins, got your whole grains, and it is just so good. So you'll thank me if you try it. It is one of our favorite leftover meals with rice. Well, friends, thank you so much for joining me in my kitchen today as we cook from scratch, make some whole grain sourdough bread. It was delicious, and it still turned out just fine, soft and delicious. This recipe will be in the description box below if you want to try it out. And thank you so much for joining me. I hope you enjoyed the video. Let me know down below what you do to make sure that you can get from scratch meals on the table every day. And we will see you on the next video.